Here are some time-saving tips to help students master ECR online. I'm Angela, the teacher behind Custom Classroom by Angela. All right, let's dive into it. We all understand that the ECR shouldn't eat up too much time for the students. We're also clear on what's expected, but how do we guide our students to actually complete this response? Today, we'll work through an online example of an ECR response based on a familiar story, and along the way, I'll share some time-saving tips. Now, I'm a fan personally of the RACES, RACES strategy, but this is not the only good option out there. Feel free to explore other strategies too, and you can easily adapt these tips along with what I'm sharing today. So let's get started. I created a sample ECR prompt based on the original story of Little Red Riding Hood, since it's very well known. The prompt reads, read the story Little Red Riding Hood. Based on the information in the story, write a response to the following. Explain how Little Red Riding Hood shows carelessness throughout the story. Write a well-organized informational composition that uses specific evidence from the story to support your answer. Remember to, and then it states all the things to include. Now, students will have read the story multiple times already and answered questions about it before they come across this final ECR prompt. So hopefully the story will be well developed in their mind and they've already been interacting with it. So now I'm going to begin with my first tip. Train students to use their ECR strategy to plan online. Don't handwrite on a separate piece of paper. By training students to type within the box and not use piece of paper will save them so much time, because now when they begin to work through the editing process, they already have all the text they need and they won't have to double the work by writing and then typing. Thinking about my RACES strategy planning page, which you can find a link for free to this in the description, I will begin to plan out a response online by taking first the letter of each component and putting it into the box. So, for example, R for restating, A for answering the question, C for citing text evidence, E for explaining the evidence, and S for summarizing. If students remember this acronym, then it will help them come testing day to picture this in their mind and remember what each thing is. I'm only putting one cited evidence and explanation because most of the time in the younger grades, it's not required to have two. If you're in the upper grades, you might want to have students do two. So first, let's look at answering the question and explaining how Little Red Riding Hood showed carelessness throughout the story. So my next saving tip is to remember to have students use the prompt while answering. So here we can see how they are specifically on the test giving them reminders of the things to include, like clearly state your controlling idea should trigger, okay, I gotta restate the question and then I need to answer it. So here, my first step is I'm going to restate the question and then follow up by directly answering it with a clear opinion or central idea. So I came up with Little Red Riding Hood shows carelessness by wandering from her path. All right, this takes us to the next step, which is to find a piece of quoted text evidence that supports our answer and follow it up with a sentence that explains how to support the answer. So here I found this direct quote: Little Red Riding Hood wandered from her path and was stooping to pick a flower. And later on, she meets the wolf. So because of that, I then led into my explanation that this quote shows Little Red Riding Hood's carelessness because she did not listen to her mother and stays on the path. She gets distracted by picking flowers. This leads her to meeting the wolf. This later puts her in danger. So here you can see that there is this piece of text evidence, but without further explanation and connecting back to her mother telling her to stay on the path and then her meeting the wolf, which leads to danger, that quote is not enough to thoroughly answer the question. Next, it takes us to the summary, which is essential here. And This is a part of the organizational piece. So to wrap up my idea, I put Little Red Riding Hood wanders from her path to pick flowers, shows she is careless. This is because it leads to her meeting the wolf. She did not listen to her mother and put herself in danger. So my next saving tip here is to have students actually edit and revise online. So now that all my planning has happened in my text box here, everything's ready and I can just go back and add or tweak or edit. I don't have to retype what I wrote down on a piece of paper, which saves a ton of time. I'm going to quickly go through how I would edit and revise this using my ECR checklist, which you can grab a free copy in the description. My fourth time-saving tip is to edit with the prompt. So I would directly teach students how, if you have this ECR checklist, which basically is listing every component required on the rubric, if you look back at a real example of an ECR prompt, they are reminding students of all the things they need to include. So this is great. They're going to be tired on testing day. They're not going to remember everything we taught them. So they need to know, hey, I have a resource right here in front of me that's going to help me remember what I need to include on this answer. First, I'm going to make sure I restate the question and clearly answer it. So my prompt says, explain how Little Red Riding Hood shows carelessness throughout the story. So my answer says, Little Red Riding Hood shows carelessness by wandering from her path. And I realized, okay, well, I need to add a little bit more to that. So I added, this puts her in danger. So now I'm going to go on to the organizational piece. And so this is a little bit trickier because if you look back on the prompt, it doesn't exactly list these things. Students are going to have to remember, okay, I got to somehow introduce my writing. I need to conclude it. I need some transitions. I need to stay on topic. So here I'm going to look back. Beginning, I really just jump into the question, but I think that's okay for my introduction. Let me look at my conclusion here. Well, okay, I'm going to go ahead and add in conclusion here. So that really solidifies this is my ending. This is what I'm going to do. And I'm also going to add a little bit more transition into my quote and say the story says. All right, so I'm feeling pretty good about my organization. Every piece of this talks about the prompt and her carelessness. So I stayed on topic. Perfect. All right, I'm going to go on to text evidence. And so here I use a direct quote, which is always best. All right, I've explained it. Yep, good. All right, so this last piece, I'm just gonna wanna quickly read over and reword things. I know I didn't do this perfectly. It was quickly typed, so I'm gonna read over it. All right, so here's what my final response looks like. So you can see a sample. And most likely, this would probably be a response for third through probably sixth or seventh grade. Any older than that, we need another evidence and a little bit more explanation. But really, to get a 3, you could probably get a 3 in a lot of the grade levels with this. So those are my 4 time-saving tips to get students more efficient for this online portion of the ECR. Make sure to check out my other ECR videos that share more helpful tips, and you can always reach out if you have any questions. Good luck.